Labour's Ed Miliband was humiliated by now Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who once compared the former Labour leader to a panda masticating bean shoots all day, unearthed reports reveal. Last week, Sir Keir Starmer appointed Mr Miliband to his new shadow cabinet, 5 years after he stood down as leader. Mr Miliband, who led the party between 2010 and 2015, will now hold the role of shadow business secretary. Sir Keir won the leadership contest on April 5, after beating Rebecca Long-Bailey and Lisa Nandy to the post. He named Ms. Nandy as his shadow foreign secretary and appointed Ms. Long-Bailey as shadow education secretary. The newly announced cabinet is majority female, with 7 BAME MPs included. A quarter of appointees attended fee-paying schools, with just under a third Oxbridge graduates. The appointments of Mr Miliband and Lord Charlie Falconer to the shadow cabinet signal the ascent of the soft left in the party, at the expense of the Jeremy, as many responded with surprise to Mr Miliband's political comeback. Unearthed reports shed light on his time as leader of the Labour Party and his relationship with Mr Johnson. In 2013, the former mayor of London likened Mr Miliband to a lazy giant panda who masticates bean shoots all day long instead of taking practical decisions. He said the then Labour leader had underwhelmed him when he was Energy Secretary in the last government, because he was apparently uninterested in backing policy with action. He described a story from their last official meeting that until then had been too harrowing to relate. Mr Johnson said he had gone to Mr Miliband to seek funding for a green energy drive across the capital. His team at City Hall had planned a program of lagging in people's homes that would have stabilized fuel bills. It would have also cut carbon emissions and helped stop the polar bears from plopping off the ice floes. But Mr Johnson said in his weekly column for the Daily Telegraph, he wrote, he didn't want to talk about cutting the cost of living. He just wanted to trade jokes about the forthcoming general election, and as one of my team put it later, he was only vaguely in command of his brief and had no interest in achieving anything. We wrote a long and optimistic follow-up letter, hoping that perhaps he had been taking it in. Nada. Not a peep. So now that he is in opposition, and struggling with his ratings, I find it rather incredible that he can seriously pretend to want to do something for the hard-pressed energy consumers in this country. He said that the reason the UK was now facing power shortages in peak times was partly Mr Miliband's fault. The former Labour leader, instead of being bold and arguing for nuclear power stations, was more interested in derisible wind farms. Mr Johnson argued that Mr Miliband was being dishonest in his party conference policy announcements to freeze household energy bills for almost 2 years and that it would be mad to return him to office. He would simply sit like a panda masticating